My name is Emily Carter, and I was 25 years old when I learned that someone could steal your whole life without ever touching your body. I had just been discharged from the hospital after emergency surgery. Still weak enough that walking from the car to my apartment door in a New York City brownstone felt like crossing a football field. I remember holding the brick wall with one hand and my discharge papers with the other, thinking all I wanted was my own bed, my own blanket, and the quiet of the first apartment I had ever paid for by myself. But when I opened the door, there was no bed, there was no blanket, there was almost nothing at all. My living room looked like a model unit after the furniture had been removed. My custom work desk was gone. My computer was gone. The tablet I used for client designs was gone. The sofa I had saved 6 months to buy was gone. My closet was empty. Even the cheap kitchen plates I bought on clearance were missing. For a second, I honestly wondered if I had opened the wrong door, because my brain refused to accept that this hollow, stripped-out space was mine. Then I saw the pale rectangle on the wall where my childhood photo frame used to hang, and my stomach dropped harder than it had in the hospital. The small silver locket my grandmother left me. The letters she kept from the 1950s. The old family pictures I had protected through every move. All of it was gone. I called my mother with my hands shaking. She answered like she had been waiting. When I asked what happened to my apartment, she laughed and said, "Emily, you were playing independent. I just cleaned up the fantasy." Then she told me they had already sold most of it. My laptop, my furniture, my clothes, even the box with my childhood photos. When I demanded to know how they got away with it, she said they told my landlord I had died from surgical complications. By the time I tried calling back, I was blocked everywhere. 3 years later, my phone rang at 5 inches the morning, and my brother was crying so hard I barely understood him. All he kept saying was, "Mom's in the hospital. Dad's breaking down. The lawyers won't stop calling. Please, Emily, make it stop." Before I tell you why those lawyers were calling, and why I did not make anything stop, tell me this. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? I want to know how far this story travels because what happened after that phone call proved one thing I will never forget. Some people only call it family when they need you to forgive what they chose to destroy. The first night I slept on Nora Bennett's couch, I kept waking up because I thought I heard my apartment door opening. My body was still fighting the infection. My stitches pulled every time I sat up too fast. And I had one plastic hospital bag with my discharge papers, my phone charger, and the clothes I had been wearing when I first collapsed. That was everything I owned that night. Everything else had either been sold, thrown away, or carried out of my apartment by the two people who used to tell me they only wanted what was best for me. Nora kept saying I could stay as long as I needed, but I could see the worry on her face when I tried to log into client accounts from my phone and realized how bad it was. I was a freelance architectural renderer. My work depended on powerful software, client files, project folders, invoices, contracts, design drafts, and backups. My computer was not just a computer, it was my income. It was my reputation. It was months of deadlines and late nights, and trust I had built with clients who had never cared about my family drama until suddenly their projects were gone with my stolen hard drives. The first week after I came home from the hospital, I lost 3 clients. One of them was kind and told me to focus on my health. Another said he understood, but needed someone reliable. The third never replied after I explained what happened. I couldn't even blame him. From the outside, it sounded insane. My mother broke into my apartment while I was in the hospital, sold my belongings, and told my landlord I died. Who says that and expects to be believed? Then the messages started coming in from people I hadn't spoken to in months. A cousin sent me a text that said, "Emily, is this really you?" I stared at it for almost a full minute before I answered. She called me immediately, crying so hard she could barely breathe, and asked why my mother had posted that I had passed away. That was how I found out the lie was bigger than my apartment. My parents had told relatives, old family friends, and half their suburban neighborhood that I died from sudden surgical complications. They said they were devastated. They said my death had been unexpected. They said they were trying to stay strong while processing an unbearable loss. The same mother who laughed at me over the phone had posted an old picture of me from high school with a caption about how no parent should have to bury a child. The same father who helped sell my work equipment accepted sympathy cards from neighbors who thought he was grieving. Their upscale neighborhood group sent meals. A woman from their charity circle organized a small memorial collection to help with expenses. People gave them money because they believed I was dead. I remember sitting on Nora's couch, still wearing sweatpants she loaned me, scrolling through screenshots my cousin sent, and feeling something inside me go completely still. There were comments from people saying they were praying for my parents. There were little heart emojis. There were people calling me a beautiful soul. There were people saying my parents were so brave. I was alive, broke, weak, and sleeping under a borrowed blanket while they were being fed and comforted for a death they invented. When I tried to contact relatives directly, some believed me immediately. Some panicked. Some accused me of being cruel for pretending to be Emily if Emily was really gone. Then the story shifted. Once people started asking questions, my parents told them I was alive but unstable. They said grief had made them confused. They said I had always been difficult and dramatic. They said I had abandoned the family and was now harassing them because I wanted attention. In 1 week, I went from dead to unstable to greedy, depending on what version helped them the most. Nora watched me print screenshots at the public library because I had no computer anymore. She drove me back to my apartment so I could take pictures of the empty rooms. The landlord looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him when I showed up alive. He admitted my parents had told him I died. They had my spare key. They had copies of hospital paperwork because they were listed as emergency contacts from years earlier. They told him they needed to clear the apartment quickly because looking at my belongings was too painful. He believed them because normal people don't lie about their daughter dying just to steal a sofa and a laptop. I asked about my security deposit. He said the lease situation was complicated now. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. For 3 months, I rebuilt from nothing. Nora gave me half her closet. I bought a used laptop that could barely run my design software. I took tiny jobs beneath my skill level because I needed cash. I ate cheap, and I made a list of everything they took. The expensive things hurt. The computer, the tablet, the furniture, the clothes. But the things I kept coming back to were the things money could never replace. My grandmother's silver locket, her handwritten letters, the old photographs of me as a baby, the ones I had saved after every move because they were proof I had existed before my parents turned me into a story they could sell. That was when my anger changed. It stopped being hot. It stopped making me shake. It became cold, focused, and permanent. I stopped asking why they did it. I started asking how to prove it. The police report didn't go the way people think it should go in stories like this. I walked into the station with hospital records, pictures of my empty apartment, screenshots of my mother's posts, and a list of stolen property so long it looked like an inventory sheet from a moving company. I thought once I explained that I had been recovering from emergency surgery while my parents emptied my apartment and sold everything I owned, someone would say, "Yes, that is theft." Instead, the officer listened, took notes, and kept asking the same kinds of questions. Did your parents have a key? Had you ever allowed them inside before? Were any of the items gifts from them? Could there have been a misunderstanding? I kept saying the same thing back. A misunderstanding doesn't explain telling my landlord I died. A misunderstanding doesn't explain selling my grandmother's locket. A misunderstanding doesn't explain blocking me everywhere after I asked for my belongings back. He didn't say he believed them. He didn't say he believed me. He said it might be a civil matter because they had access to the apartment, and because ownership would have to be proven item by item. I left with a report number, and the sick feeling that my parents had chosen the perfect kind of cruelty, not the kind that gets handled quickly, the kind that gets buried in paperwork while everyone tells you to calm down. Nora was the one who found the attorney. His name was not important to me at first. What mattered was that he looked at my folder, listened to the whole story without interrupting, and then said, "They counted on you being too tired to fight this." That was the first time I felt like someone understood. He explained that the criminal side might be slow or uncertain, but civil court was different. If we could show that they took property that belonged to me, sold it without permission, damaged my income, and used lies to gain access and sympathy money, we had a case. It wouldn't be fast. It wouldn't be clean, and it would cost money I didn't have. Nora loaned me the retainer. I cried when she did it, not because I was weak, but because after months of being treated like a problem, someone was willing to bet on my truth. The lawsuit took almost 2 years. 2 years of my parents trying to turn theft into concern. 2 years of them saying they believed I was spiraling and needed intervention. 2 years of them claiming they only removed things because they thought I would come home where I belonged. My mother said some of the items were family property. My father said I had been irresponsible with money, and they were trying to protect me from myself. Their lawyer tried to suggest that because I was hospitalized, my memory of what I owned might be unreliable. I remember reading that line in one of the filings and laughing so hard I felt nothing. They were not just defending themselves. They were still trying to erase me, only now they were doing it in legal language. But I had receipts. I had bank statements showing I bought my own desk, my own sofa, my own electronics, my own design equipment. I had photos of my apartment from the week before surgery because I had taken portfolio pictures in my workspace. I had emails from clients referencing files stored on my drives. I had the landlord's written statement confirming my parents told him I had died from complications. I had screenshots of online listings where my mother sold my furniture in bundles. One buyer even replied to my attorney and confirmed he had bought a box of old photos and jewelry as part of what my mother called an estate cleanout. An estate cleanout. That phrase stayed with me. I was 25 years old and alive, and my mother had sold my childhood like I was an estate. Nora gave a statement about driving me home from the hospital and watching me open the door to an empty apartment. She described how pale I got, how I kept saying, "My photos are gone, my photos are gone." Like my brain couldn't move past that one fact. My parents hated her for that. My mother called her an outside influence. My father said she had filled my head with anger. That was their favorite trick. Anyone who believed me must have been manipulating me. Anyone who challenged them must have had bad intentions. The court didn't care about their performance as much as they expected. The judge cared about documents, dates, receipts, contradictions. Why did they tell the landlord I was dead if this was a family intervention? Why did they sell my equipment if they were preserving my future? Why did they accept memorial money if they knew I was alive? Why did they block me instead of returning anything? My mother cried in court. My father looked offended that crying was not enough. When the judgment came down, I read it 3 times before I fully understood it. I had won $41,600, property value, lost income, emotional damages, and part of my legal fees. It wasn't enough to replace the locket. It wasn't enough to bring back the photographs. It wasn't enough to give me back the months I spent building a life from a borrowed couch. But it was official. It was written down by someone they couldn't charm. They appealed, of course. They said the amount was unfair. They said the court misunderstood their intentions. They said I was punishing them instead of seeking resolution. They lost. When the appeal failed and the judgment became final, I didn't celebrate. I sat at my tiny secondhand desk, put the court order beside my grandmother's one surviving scanned photo, and whispered, "Now we collect." The part people don't understand about revenge is that the loudest moment is rarely the most important one. My parents expected me to scream. They expected me to make threats, show up at their house, cry in front of relatives, and give them a chance to paint me as unstable. I didn't give them that. For 3 years, I became quiet in a way that made people uncomfortable. I made folders. I made timelines. I saved every screenshot, every message, every post where they performed grief over a daughter they knew was alive. I requested copies of my medical records. I got a full statement from my landlord. I kept the court filings in labeled envelopes. I wrote down names of people who donated to the memorial collection and names of people who had been told different versions of my death. Then I started repairing the damage one person at a time. I didn't send emotional essays. I sent evidence. To my aunt, I sent the hospital admission and discharge dates. To my cousin, I sent the judgment. To an old family friend, I sent the screenshot of my mother's memorial post beside the date she listed my desk online for sale. Some people apologized immediately. Some people went silent because silence was easier than admitting they had helped spread a lie. Some people said they believed me but still wanted me to move on. Those were the ones who heard in a different way. They didn't deny what happened, they just wanted the truth to be less inconvenient. My parents lived in a large house in North Hills, Long Island, the kind with perfect landscaping, seasonal wreaths, and a kitchen island big enough to host the kind of brunches my mother loved posting online. That house mattered to them more than almost anything. It wasn't just where they lived, it was their costume. It told the neighborhood they were successful, stable, generous, respected. My father worked in mortgage lending, so image was part of his business. My mother floated between charity committees, homeowner events, and online shopping hauls she pretended were tasteful investments. Later, I learned they had already been behind before they robbed me. Credit cards maxed out, mortgage payments late, private embarrassment hidden behind public smiles. My apartment had been a quick cash solution wrapped in a fake tragedy. Once the judgment became final, my attorney asked if I wanted to discuss settlement. I said no. My parents had not paid $1. They had ignored the judgment the same way they ignored my calls from the empty apartment. So, we began enforcement. A lien was placed against their house. My father's wages were garnished. Their bank accounts were hit through legal channels. Suddenly, the consequences were not emotional anymore. They were financial, public, and impossible to explain away. My father's employer found out. The HOA board heard rumors. Neighbors who had contributed to the memorial collection started asking why a daughter they mourned was now collecting a judgment against her own parents. That was the thing about lies. They were easy when everyone was sad, and nobody asked for documents. They became much harder when court orders arrived. Then one morning at 5, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. At first, all I heard was breathing and crying. Then my brother said my name. Ethan. I hadn't heard his voice in 3 years. Not once after the hospital. Not once after the empty apartment. Not once after he watched our parents turn me into a ghost. He was sobbing so badly the words came out broken. Mom is in the hospital. Dad is losing it. The lawyers keep calling. The bank called again. People from the neighborhood want their money back. Emily, please, please make it stop. I sat up in bed, fully awake now. I asked him what he wanted me to stop. He said the lien, the wage garnishment, the calls, the questions, the humiliation. He said my mother had a panic attack so bad my father called an ambulance. He said my father hadn't slept. He said the house was in trouble. He said everyone was blaming them. Then his voice changed. He said, "You are destroying us." For a second, I saw my old apartment again. I saw the clean squares on the carpet where furniture used to be. I saw the empty place on my dresser where my grandmother's locket had been. I heard my mother laughing and saying I was playing independent. Ethan kept crying into the phone, waiting for me to comfort him. Instead, I asked him one question. Did you help them carry my things out? The line went quiet. That silence told me more than any answer could have. He whispered that he didn't know what was happening back then. He said he was confused. He said he thought our parents were handling it. I told him I would call him back and hung up. I didn't call back. Not that morning. Not after 6 more missed calls. Not after the voicemails. They had spent 3 years telling people I was dead. Now they were learning how patient the dead can be when they come back with paperwork. I waited 4 days before I agreed to go to my parents' house. Not because I was afraid. Not because I needed time to calm down. I waited because they had made me wait 3 years for accountability, and I wanted them to understand that this conversation was happening on my schedule, not theirs. When I pulled into the driveway that Saturday afternoon, the house looked exactly the way I remembered it, and nothing like the truth. The lawn was trimmed. The porch had matching planters. There was a tasteful wreath on the door, the kind my mother would have described as understated but expensive. From the outside, it still looked like the home of people who had everything under control. Ethan opened the door before I knocked. He looked thinner, exhausted, and angry in the way people get when they want sympathy. But no, they haven't earned it. He started talking immediately. Mom is home now. Dad is barely functioning. You need to hear them out. They are not monsters. I walked past him into the living room. My parents were sitting on the sofa, but they were not alone. 2 people from their neighborhood circle were there. A woman my mother used to host charity luncheons with, and a man who had served with my father on the HOA finance committee. I almost laughed. They hadn't invited witnesses for the truth. They had invited an audience for their performance. My father stood up first and said they thought it would be helpful to have neutral people present so everyone could move toward healing. I told him there was nothing neutral about people who donated to a memorial fund for a woman standing alive in front of them. The woman looked at my mother. My mother looked at the floor. That was when I knew they hadn't told these people everything. My father tried to regain control. He said this family had suffered enough, and that while mistakes were made, dragging things through lawyers would only create more pain. I asked him which mistake he meant. Was it opening my apartment while I was recovering from surgery? Was it selling my work equipment? Was it telling the landlord I died? Was it accepting money from neighbors who thought they were helping with grief expenses? The room went very still. The man from the HOA shifted in his chair. My mother finally started crying. She said I would never understand the pressure she had been under. She said the bills were piling up. My father's commissions had slowed, and she had been trying so hard to keep the family image from falling apart. She said the online shopping had gotten out of control because every event, every dinner, every neighborhood gathering came with expectations. She said she made one terrible decision during a terrifying time. I told her one terrible decision is buying something you cannot afford. What she did took planning. It took a key. It took a truck. It took online. It took a lie about my death. It took blocking my number after I begged for my belongings back. She flinched when I said begged, and I was glad. My father said they were willing to make things right in a realistic way. He said the judgment was impossible. He said if I continued enforcing it, they could lose the house. He said maybe we could agree to reduce the amount, pause the garnishment, and work out a private family arrangement. I asked if he meant the kind of private family arrangement where they take everything and I stay quiet so they can keep their house. He said I was twisting his words. I said no. I was finally repeating them clearly. Then I turned to Ethan. I asked him again what I had asked on the phone. Did you help them carry my things out? He started crying before he answered. He said he helped unload boxes into the garage. He said he saw my desk, my chair, my clothes in trash bags, my equipment, and the small wooden box from my dresser. He said he asked if they should keep it because it looked personal. My mother told him no. Everything had to go. He said he was 23 and scared to challenge them. I stared at him until he looked away. I told him he had been old enough to know the difference between helping and hiding. He said he thought maybe it was some kind of intervention. I asked what kind of intervention sells a silver locket with a dead woman's letters inside. No one answered. That was the pattern for the entire conversation. They had explanations until I asked for specifics. They had tears until I named actions. They had family values until money came up. My mother said, I am still your mother. I said, you became a stranger when you told people I was dead. The woman from the neighborhood finally spoke. Her voice was quiet. She asked my mother if the memorial collection had been based on a lie. My mother said it was complicated. That one word did more damage than anything I could have said. Complicated meant yes. Complicated meant the sympathy meals, the cards, the money, the public grief. All of it had been built on fraud. My father told me I was humiliating them. I told him I was not humiliating them. I was refusing to help them hide. When I walked out, Ethan followed me to the driveway. He said they were falling apart. He said Mom was sick. He said Dad might lose his position. He said people were turning against them. I asked him where his concern was when I was sleeping on Nora's couch, with one borrowed sweater and no way to work. He wiped his face and said he was sorry. I told him sorry is what people say when the truth costs them something. Accountability is what they do before that. Then I got in my car and left them standing in the driveway of the house they had chosen over me. After that meeting, the family machine turned on. Not the part of the family that had checked on me after surgery. Not the part that had offered me a place to stay when I had nothing. The other part. The part that wakes up only when consequences reach the people who usually control the story. My Aunt Valerie called first. She said she loved me and believed what happened was terrible, but I needed to think about the bigger picture. I asked her what bigger picture included selling my childhood photos. She sighed like I was being difficult and said no one was defending what they did. They just wanted a solution that didn't destroy the whole family. Then my Uncle Mark called and said courts were not the place for family wounds. I told him family homes were not the place for stolen property either. But here we were. My cousin Paige sent a long message asking if I actually needed the full amount, or if I was just trying to punish them. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. Finally, I sent her the judgment and the photo of my empty apartment. She didn't reply for 2 days. When she did, all she said was, I didn't know it was that bad. That became the theme. Everyone knew just enough to have an opinion and not enough to feel ashamed. My parents had started admitting to a softer version of the truth. They said they made mistakes. They said they handled my apartment badly. They said grief and fear and money problems clouded their judgment. They said I had won in court, and now I was refusing to let the family heal. It was brilliant in the ugliest way. They were no longer denying everything. They were admitting to just enough to make themselves look humble, while making me look cruel for continuing to enforce the judgment. Thanksgiving was when it exploded. Valerie invited everyone and told me it would be good for me to be around family again. She didn't tell me my parents would be there. When I walked into her dining room and saw them sitting on the sofa, I almost turned around immediately. Ethan was beside them, pale and tense. My father looked older, but not sorry. My mother looked fragile in a way I knew she had chosen carefully. Soft sweater, no makeup, trembling hands around a mug of tea. The room went quiet when I entered, which told me everyone had been waiting for the show to begin. Dinner had not even started before Mark suggested we all sit down and speak from the heart. I said I had no interest in a surprise family therapy session. My father stood anyway. He said he wanted to apologize publicly. He said he and my mother had been under extreme financial pressure and had made decisions they deeply regretted. He said they never meant to hurt me the way they did. I asked him what decisions. He blinked. I said, "Say them." He said, "They took some of my belongings." I said, "You emptied my apartment while I was in the hospital." He said, "Yes." That I asked if he was sorry for telling my landlord I died. He said, "That was a terrible misunderstanding." I asked who misunderstood my pulse. No one laughed. My mother started crying and said she couldn't survive being attacked like this forever. She said she had apologized. I said she had apologized for being under pressure, not for what she did. She said I wanted her to crawl. I said I wanted her to tell the truth without decorating it. Then I asked about the memorial money in front of everyone. The room changed. Some relatives had not known about that part. My father's jaw tightened. My mother said people gave out of kindness, and they never asked for it. I said they accepted money for a dead daughter who was alive and begging for her belongings back. Ethan slammed his hand on the table and said I was impossible. He said every person in that room was trying to move forward and I wanted blood. I looked at him and said, "No, I wanted $41,600, which was the number a court assigned to what they stole." Valerie tried to suggest a payment plan, maybe a small monthly amount to show good faith. I asked her to calculate how long it would take at $50 a month. She looked down. Mark said family mattered more than money. I said that was strange, because when my parents needed money, family was the first thing they sold. That ended dinner before it began. My mother sobbed. My father told me I had become vindictive. Ethan called me selfish. I left before dessert, and by the time I got home, my phone was full of messages. Some said I had ruined Thanksgiving. Some said they finally understood. Some said they didn't know who to believe anymore. But outside the family, the damage was moving faster. The neighborhood found out about the memorial fund. People who had delivered meals began asking questions. Someone posted in the private HOA group about the court judgment. The charity committee quietly removed my mother. My father was asked to step down from the board, after people questioned how a man under wage garnishment and a fraud scandal could oversee community finances. His client started hearing rumors, too. In mortgage lending, trust is currency, and his was disappearing fast. The house was already behind. The lien made refinancing almost impossible. The garnishment made catching up harder. The legal fees drained whatever they had left. Ethan called again and said they were going to lose everything. He said if I had 1 ounce of compassion, I would stop. I told him compassion without accountability is just permission. He said I was tearing the family apart. I said no. I was refusing to hold together a lie that had been cutting me for 3 years. Everyone kept asking me to save the family, but no one could explain why saving the family meant protecting the people who destroyed it. The foreclosure became final in early spring. Ethan sent me a long message the night before they had to be out, telling me this was my last chance to do the right thing. He said they had nowhere good to go. He said Mom was barely sleeping. He said Dad looked like a broken man. He said, if I let them lose the house, I would have to live with that forever. I read the message twice, then set my phone face down and went to bed. The next morning, I drove to North Hills and parked across the street from the house my parents used to treat like proof that they were better than everyone else. There was a rental truck in the driveway. Not movers, just a cheap truck and a stack of cardboard boxes sagging near the garage. My father was carrying lamps. My mother was standing on the porch with her arms folded across her chest, staring at the yard like she was waiting for it to apologize. Ethan saw me first. He put down the box in his hands and walked toward my car. his face already twisted with anger. He asked what I was doing there. I told him the truth. I wanted to see it. He said I came to gloat. Maybe part of me did. I won't pretend to be more graceful than I was. 3 years earlier, I stood in the middle of an empty apartment with hospital tape still on my arm, and no one in my family came to see what they had done to me. So yes, I wanted to see the house empty. I wanted to see the life they protected with my stolen belongings collapse under its own weight. My father walked down the driveway slowly. He looked older, smaller, and furious. That looking defeated didn't make him innocent. He said, "Are you satisfied now?" I said, "Not with the money?" "No," he said. There was no money. The bankruptcy would handle what it handled, and the rest was gone. They had lost the house. They had lost friends. They had lost standing. He asked what more I wanted. I told him I wanted him to stop acting like the foreclosure was something I did to him instead of something he built one lie at a time. My mother came down the steps then. Her voice was quiet at first. She said she didn't recognize me anymore. She said the daughter she raised would never enjoy watching her parents suffer. I said the daughter she raised came home from surgery and found out her mother had sold her life in pieces. She said I was cruel. I said, "You told people I was dead." She looked away. That was the closest she ever came to shame. Ethan started yelling that I had destroyed everyone. He said he lost friends. He said the family barely spoke. He said he couldn't believe I was punishing him for something our parents did. I reminded him that he had helped unload my belongings into their garage. I reminded him that he saw my grandmother's box and said nothing. I reminded him that he stayed silent for 3 years and only called me when the consequences reached his bedroom. He said I didn't understand what it was like living under their pressure. I said he didn't understand what it was like being erased by people who were supposed to protect you. My father told me to leave. Before I did, I looked at the house one more time. The perfect porch, the empty windows, the neighbors pretending not to watch. For years, that house had been their stage. Every party, every charity meeting, every polished photo, every smiling lie had been performed there. Now, it was just another property the bank wanted back. They moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment 2 towns over. My mother got a part-time retail job at a home decor store, which felt almost poetic considering how many pretty things she had bought to hide an ugly life. My father took lower-paying work after his reputation in lending collapsed. People from the neighborhood stopped inviting them anywhere. Some still wanted their memorial money back. Others simply wanted distance from the embarrassment. Ethan moved in with a friend for a while and blamed me loudly to anyone who would listen. The family split in ways that will probably never fully heal. Valerie and Mark think I went too far. Paige apologized months later and admitted she had let discomfort matter more than truth. My grandmother Elaine calls me every few weeks. She says she is proud of me for standing up for myself, even though she is ashamed of what her son became. Those calls mean more than she knows. As for me, I rebuilt. Not quickly, not perfectly, but honestly, I have a new apartment now. One with furniture I bought again, locks only I control, and a workstation better than the one they sold. My design business recovered. I have clients who trust me, friends who showed up, and a framed copy of the one scanned childhood photo I still have. I never got the locket back. I never got the letters. Some losses do not become whole just because a court agrees you were wronged. But I learned something important, and I hope anyone listening understands it too. Family is not a free pass to betray someone. Forgiveness is not something other people get to demand because accountability makes them uncomfortable. And justice does not always look like shouting or revenge in the street. Sometimes justice looks like documents, patience, boundaries, and refusing to let people rewrite the harm they caused. My parents wanted me to disappear so they could keep their house, their image, and their perfect story. Instead, the truth took all of that from them. I don't regret it. I didn't destroy my family. I exposed what was already rotten inside it. And if someone ever uses the word family to steal your peace, your work, your memories, or your future, ask yourself this. Would you forgive blindly just to keep everyone comfortable? Or would you stand up and make them face the truth?